She woke up earlier than usual, her heart fluttering in a strange mix of excitement and longing. The sunlight seeped through the curtains in gentle streams, painting golden patterns on the floor of her quiet, modest home in upstate New York. Today was her birthday, her 67th. She had never made a big deal about birthdays, not really, but this one felt different, not because of the number, but because for the first time in years, she had dared to hope. Her grandson, Aiden, had always been her soft spot. He was the first baby she ever held who called her Nana before he could say his own name. She remembered his small hands tugging at her apron strings while she baked cookies, his giggles echoing down the hallway when she chased him with a toy dinosaur, and the way he'd run to her every time his parents argued. He had been her sunshine when the storms of life seemed relentless. After her husband passed away, Aiden became her lifeline. She had raised him for nearly 6 years when her daughter went through a messy divorce. Her daughter, Lily, had been a complicated soul, bouncing between jobs and relationships, too focused on rebuilding her own life to give Aiden the stability he needed. So, the boy had spent most of his formative years in Nana's small house attending kindergarten, riding his bike along the street, and falling asleep on the living room couch during movie nights. That time had bonded them in a way even she couldn't fully describe. Years passed, and when Lily remarried, she took Aiden back, this time to live in another state. Nana had understood. She didn't fight it. She didn't want to be the reason her daughter's family didn't feel whole. Still, it was like having a part of her heart cut out and mailed somewhere unreachable. She only asked for one thing, that she could still talk to Aiden regularly, and for a while, they did. He'd text her sometimes, send memes, even video call on weekends. It wasn't the same, but it was enough to survive on. But something had changed in the last year. She felt it first like a cool draft in a warm room, sudden and uninvited. He stopped replying to texts, then calls. Birthdays and holidays came and went with no word from him. At first, she chalked it up to teenage mood swings, but deep down, she knew something had shifted, something unspoken. Still, she clung to hope that today, on her birthday, he would remember. She had made his favorite oatmeal cookies, the kind they used to bake together. She set them carefully in a tin, thinking maybe she'd send them later if he called. She even pulled out a photo album, the one with the red velvet cover and fraying edges that held memories of all the birthdays they had shared. There was the one where she turned 60 and he surprised her with a handmade card saying, "You're the best Nana in the world." She had saved it in a plastic sleeve to protect it from time. As the hours ticked by, silence began to swallow her home. She checked her phone over and over, cleaned the screen just in case she had missed a notification. Nothing. She refreshed her messages, opened and closed the photo gallery, stared at the last conversation they had, a single hi she had sent months ago that remained unanswered. By noon, her throat ached from unspoken words. She wanted to tell herself it was okay, that he must be busy, that maybe he was planning a surprise. She tried distracting herself, turned on the TV, started knitting, even walked around the neighborhood, but nothing could hush the growing ache inside her chest. By early evening, she couldn't take it anymore. She opened her Facebook app, something she rarely used, and searched for his profile, Aiden James. A few seconds later, she was staring at a gray screen that said no posts available. Her hands trembled as she refreshed. She tried from her browser, logged out and logged in again, but the result was the same. Her heart began to pound, each beat a thunderclap in her ears. She searched his name again from another account backup profile she used for book clubs. His page loaded just fine. Recent photos, birthday wishes from friends, stories from last night's party. That's when it hit her. He had blocked her. He had deliberately cut her out of his digital world, and her birthday. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet. The pain was too new, too raw. It was the kind of wound that hadn't even started bleeding. She stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Why would he do that? What had she done to deserve this kind of erasure? She replayed the last conversation in her mind, trying to remember if she had said something wrong. She remembered asking him months ago if he was okay, if he needed anything, and he had read the message but never replied. Could it be Lily? Maybe her daughter had said something. Maybe she didn't want Aiden talking to her anymore, but Lily had sent her a birthday message earlier that day. Polite, short, "Happy birthday, Mom. Hope you're well." No call, just a message. The kind you send to someone you're obligated to remember, not someone you love. Asterisk, she sat back, her spine pressing into the cold leather of her armchair. The house, once warm with memories and laughter, felt hollow. The air was still, the kind of stillness that settles only when someone realizes they've been truly forgotten, not missed, not delayed, forgotten, or worse, intentionally left out. Asterisk, it wasn't just a blocking, it was what it symbolized. Asterisk, he didn't want her to be part of his world anymore. She had raised him, sacrificed for him, stayed awake through his fevers, made up lullabies when he cried at night, cheered him on during school plays, and now, she was just nothing to him, not even worth a message, not even worth a click to unblock. Asterisk, she finally allowed herself to cry, but not loudly, no wails, just quiet tears, tracing the lines of her face, sliding into the creases of her age. The pain wasn't in the noise, it was in the silence, the long, echoing silence of a house where no one calls anymore. Asterisk, she didn't eat dinner that night. She wasn't hungry. She just sat, wrapped in a wool shawl, with the television on mute and the room dim. The birthday cake she had ordered for herself, just a small one with white icing, and "Happy Birthday Nana" written in pink, sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Asterisk, at some point, she looked at her phone again, as if hoping the screen would light up with an apology, a mistake, anything to prove what she saw wasn't real. But it stayed dark. Asterisk, she didn't sleep well that night. Instead, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of memories pressing on her like invisible bricks. The way he used to crawl into her lap, the way he would say, "Nana, when I grow up, I'll take care of you." He had said it so many times, with such sincerity, and now she wondered if he even remembered those words, if they had meant anything to him, or if they were just childhood promises tossed aside like broken toys. Asterisk, but amidst all that pain, a small ember of resolve began to flicker inside her. It was subtle, quiet. She didn't know what form it would take yet, but something in her had shifted. This wasn't just grief, it was betrayal. The kind that doesn't just heal with time, the kind that leaves scars with names written across them. Asterisk, he may have blocked her from his phone, from his social media, from his life, but he had not blocked her from remembering. And memory was her most powerful weapon. Asterisk, she closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to think. Her birthday had taught her something she never wanted to learn. Asterisk, sometimes, the deepest wounds come not from enemies, but from the ones we loved enough to raise. Asterisk, and sometimes, silence is the loudest kind of goodbye. Asterisk, the next morning, sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, illuminating the quiet hollowness that had settled over her room. She had barely slept, and when she finally rose, her limbs felt heavy. Not from fatigue alone, but from the invisible burden of heartbreak. Her birthday had come and gone, with no call, no text, and the cold realization that her grandson, her Aden, had not only ignored her but gone as far as to block her. The pain had not dulled with the passing hours. In fact, it had grown sharper. In the morning light, Asterisk, she moved about the house in a trance, her routine lifeless. She fed the cat, who meowed softly as if sensing something was wrong. She boiled water for tea but didn't touch the cup once it was poured. The oatmeal cookies, still sitting in the tin she had prepared with such affection, remained untouched on the counter. They mocked her now, reminders of a hope that had been met with silence. Asterisk, for a long time, she stood in front of the fireplace mantel, staring at the framed photograph of her and Aiden at his kindergarten graduation. His small arms wrapped around her neck, both of them smiling as if nothing in the world could come between them. That moment felt like a different lifetime. What had changed? She kept asking herself that question, trying to find the fracture in their relationship. Had she said something, failed him in some invisible way, or had he simply grown away from her, as so many young people do, swept up in the current of their own lives, forgetting those who anchored them in their early years? Asterisk, her mind wandered back to when Aiden was 13, the first time he had a falling out with his mother. He had come to her house, his eyes red from crying, and told her he wished she was his real mom. That moment had stayed with her like a sacred secret. She had hugged him tightly and told him that no matter what happened, he would always have her. She had meant it, every word. Asterisk, now, sitting at the kitchen table, her hand reached unconsciously for her phone. She opened the messaging app and stared at the gray silhouette next to Aiden's name. No status, no photo, no option to message. He was condigitally erased from her life like a chalkboard wiped clean. Her fingers hovered over the call button, knowing it would go nowhere. But still, she pressed it. The line rang once. Then, the automated voice chimed in. The number you are trying to reach is unavailable. Her heart dropped again, but this time she didn't cry. Instead, she opened the red velvet photo album again. She traced the edges of the pictures with her fingertips. Each one was a story: camping trips, science fairs, Halloween costumes, scraped knees and proud smiles. She could see in his eyes how much he loved her back then. That love couldn't have vanished so easily, could it? But maybe that was her mistake, thinking love, once given and received, became permanent. She thought about reaching out to Lily, but dismissed the idea quickly. Her daughter had become distant too. Their conversations had become polite, but shallow. There had been no confrontation, no big argument, just a slow drifting apart, like two ships no longer sharing the same current. Still, Lily's short birthday message from yesterday had stung in its own way. It had none of the warmth she remembered from the years they used to bake together, laugh together, cry together. It was as if the world she had built around her family had slowly been dismantled brick by brick while she wasn't looking, and now she was standing alone, surrounded by empty spaces where love used to live. She sat in silence for hours, until a knock at the door startled her. For a fleeting moment, her heart lifted. Perhaps he had come, ashamed and ready to apologize, but as she opened the door, it was only the mailman. A stack of envelopes, mostly bills and advertisements. Except one. It was a card from the church community center. Happy birthday, Edith. It read, written in bright blue ink. You're in our prayers always. She smiled sadly. Kindness from strangers felt warmer than silence from her own blood. Later that day, she decided to go for a walk. The wind was gentle, and the sun, though slightly hidden by clouds, warmed her skin just enough. She walked past the elementary school where Aiden used to play on the swings. She paused there for a while, watching the children run and laugh. Their joy made her chest tighten. She used to sit on that bench over there, with a thermos of tea, waiting for the school bell to ring. He would run into her arms, backpack bouncing. She remembered how he used to smell of crayons in sunlight. Her feet carried her to the park next, the one with the pond and the ducks he used to chase. Memories lingered in every corner of this town. Echoes of Aiden, echoes of who she used to be when he needed her. It felt like she was chasing ghosts, trying to hold on to shadows that had long since faded. When she returned home, it was nearing dusk. The sky was tinged with orange and pink, and the wind carried the scent of coming rain. She stepped inside, shutting the door gently behind her, and sat back at her table. The silence was deafening. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the absence of connection. The knowledge that, somewhere out there, her grandson was living his life without her. That he had chosen to remove her, intentionally, with the swipe of a finger. And then came the anger. Not the loud, explosive kind. This was different. It was quiet, simmering just beneath the surface. She had spent her entire life giving, first to her husband, then to her daughter, and finally to Aiden. She had sacrificed her dreams, her comforts, even her health, just to make sure they never lacked anything. And now, here she was, alone on her birthday, not even worthy of a simple message. She stood up, walked to her room, and opened the drawer of her bedside table. Inside was an old leather-bound journal. She hadn't written in it in years. The last entry was from Aiden's high school graduation. She flipped to a blank page and picked up a pen. Her hands trembled slightly, but her thoughts were clear. She began to write not just about her pain, but about everything she had done for Aiden, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every little act of love that had gone unnoticed. The words poured out of her like a storm that had waited too long to break. She wasn't writing for anyone else. She was writing for herself, for the version of her that had been silenced by rejection. The anger gave her strength, but the writing gave her clarity. She realized she had been waiting too long for people to show up, to validate her, to remember her worth, and maybe that was her greatest mistake, tying her value to the way others treated her. She had always believed that love meant loyalty, that family meant forever. But now, as she filled page after page, she began to understand something else. Love also meant letting go. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. Asterisk, she closed the journal and stared out the window. The wind had picked up and rain had begun to fall, lightly tapping against the glass like a soft warning. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a car door slammed. Life was continuing, with or without apologies. Asterisk, she got up, turned off her phone, and tucked it away in a drawer. She was done waiting for a call that would never come. And though her heart was still broken, a new resolve began to form. Not revenge in the usual sense, but something deeper. She would not beg to be seen. She would not plead to be remembered. From this point forward, she would write her story differently. Asterisk, her grandson had blocked her on her birthday. That was his choice, but how she responded, that would be hers. The rain continued into the night, a gentle, constant whisper against the window panes. It was the kind of weather she used to love, curling up in her favorite chair, with a thick blanket and a book. Maybe sipping hot chocolate while Aiden played on the floor nearby with his toy trains. But now, the rain didn't comfort her. It only made the silence louder, like a slow metronome ticking in time with her heartbeat, reminding her of what was missing. Asterisk, the next morning, she woke up without an alarm. Her body had grown used to the ache of solitude now, the weight of disappointment settling like a second skin. She didn't cry this time. There were no tears left, only questions that had no answers and a quiet fury that had begun to grow roots inside her. She wasn't just sad anymore. She was beginning to feel insulted, discarded, forgotten like an outdated phone number. Asterisk, she made a decision that morning. She needed to find out why. Not for closure, not yet. She was far from peace, but because she couldn't live with the unknown, she couldn't keep walking through her home haunted by questions. Her instincts told her this wasn't just a teenage whim or digital forgetfulness. No, this felt personal, calculated. Asterisk, she started with the family photos. She went to her attic, a place she hadn't visited in years. There were boxers labeled Lily's childhood, Tom and me, and Aiden, baby to teen. She opened the last one, and as the musty smell of time met her nose, she felt her throat tighten. She pulled out scrapbooks, drawings, school, awards, even a tattered teddy bear he had once named Captain Snuggles. Asterisk, she flipped through everything slowly, like a detective combing through evidence, not for nostalgia this time, but for understanding. It was all there, his early love for her, their laughter, their bond. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't delusional. Aiden had loved her. He had needed her. He had trusted her. So what happened? Asterisk, she found a school letter written by his teacher when he was 10, praising the way his guardian had nurtured him with calm and wisdom during difficult times. It reminded her of how she used to attend every parent-teacher meeting in Lily's absence, how she helped him through his first science fair, and now she couldn't even reach him on his birthday. The contrast was too cruel. Asterisk, something had poisoned that love. That much she was sure of. Asterisk, by noon, she made herself a small lunch, though she barely touched it. Her appetite had dwindled. Her mind was elsewhere, cycling through memories, looking for cracks in the story, signs of discontent she might have missed. Asterisk, she remembered last year's Thanksgiving. Asterisk, that was the last time she saw Aiden in person. Asterisk, he had come with Lily and her new husband. Everything had seemed fine on the surface. Polite smiles, surface conversations. But now, in hindsight, she remembered something. Aiden had been unusually quiet, not cold, but withdrawn. She chalked it up to teen awkwardness. But maybe it wasn't that. Maybe he was already slipping away back then. She remembered offering him more pie, his favorite pecan. He had declined, a little too quickly. She remembered him flinching when she tried to touch his arm, then brushing it off with an apologetic smile. At the time, she had ignored it. Now it played like a warning sign she had failed to see. Asterisk and Lily. There was something in her eyes that day, tunic guilt, or perhaps superiority. The way she kept checking her phone, distracted, distant, uninterested. Had Lily said something to Aiden? Had she poisoned him against her? But why? What did she gain from it? Asterisk. Edith leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. Speculation was a dangerous game, but she couldn't help it. Every moment she retraced made her feel more certain that someone had planted seeds of resentment in Aiden's mind. And who better than Lily, who had always carried an undercurrent of blame toward her mother, even after Edith had raised her child when she couldn't. Asterisk, she picked up the phone and opened Lily's contact. Her finger hovered over the call button again, but she couldn't press it. She wasn't ready to hear half-truths, polite denials, or gaslighting disguised as concern. No, she needed facts, and she needed to get them her own way. Asterisk, she remembered that Lily's old best friend Marla still lived in town. Marla used to babysit Aiden when he was younger, and remained friendly over the years, though their interactions had become sparse. Edith hadn't seen her since the early days of Lily's second marriage, but maybe Marla still knew something. After all, friends often hear what family does not. She decided to visit her. She changed into a sweater and jeans, brushed her hair, and applied a touch of lipstick, a ritual she hadn't performed in weeks. Not because she wanted to impress, but because she needed to feel in control again, like herself. Not a castaway or a relic, but a woman on a mission. Asterisk, Marla lived just 2 neighborhoods over. The drive was short, though the streets seemed longer than usual, as if stretching in anticipation of what Edith might find. When she pulled into the driveway, Marla's garden gnome collection greeted her cheerily, a bizarre contrast to the knot forming in her stomach. Asterisk. Marla opened the door with surprised eyes. Asterisk, Edith, she said, clearly caught off guard. Wow, it's been years. Asterisk, yes, Edith replied with a faint smile. I know this is unexpected, but, do you have a moment? Asterisk, Marla stepped aside. Of course, come in. What's going on? Asterisk, they sat in her cozy living room, surrounded by quilted pillows and the scent of cinnamon potpourri. Edith explained her reason for coming without sugarcoating. She told Marla about the birthday, the blocking, the silence. Marla's face changed gradually, from confusion to discomfort to sympathy. I don't know all the details, Marla began carefully, but I did hear Lily say some things about you a while back. Asterisk, Edith's heart dropped. What kind of things? Asterisk, Marla hesitated, then spoke slowly. It was during a dinner party, about a year ago. I think you had called Aiden twice in one day, just to check on him. Lily made a joke about how controlling you still were, said something like you guilt-tripped Aiden into obedience even when he didn't want to talk. People laughed. It didn't feel right. Asterisk, Edith blinked, stunned. Controlling. Asterisk, Marla sighed. Look, you and I both know how much you did for that boy, but Lily's always been defensive when it comes to you. Maybe she felt overshadowed, maybe she needed to reclaim that maternal role, and the only way she could was by making you look overbearing. Edith felt her chest tighten. All these years she had walked carefully, never claiming the title of mother, even though she had been one to Aiden in every way that mattered. And now that she had stepped back, her daughter had rewritten the story, turned care into control, affection into manipulation. Asterisk, she said, Aiden needed space. Marla added that he was tired of emotional pressure. I don't know what that means exactly, but she sounded serious. Asterisk, Edith stood up slowly, feeling years of patience hardening into something else. It wasn't rage, not yet, but it was a betrayal that tasted bitter in her mouth. Asterisk, thank you for telling me, she said, her voice soft but cold. I needed to hear it. Asterisk, Marla touched her hand. You deserve better, Edith. You really do. Asterisk, the drive home was silent. Edith didn't turn on the radio. She didn't cry either. Instead, she focused on the road, her grip on the steering wheel firm. She now had a clearer picture. Not a full one, but enough to know her instincts were right. Asterisk, Aiden hadn't abandoned her blindly. He had been led away, perhaps by fear, perhaps by confusion, perhaps by someone else's narrative, poisoning the roots of their bond. Asterisk, and that was worse than if he had simply forgotten. Asterisk, she walked into her house like someone returning to a battlefield. Nothing had changed in her living room. The same photographs, same cushions, same ticking clock, but everything inside her had shifted. Asterisk, she now saw the situation not just as a loss, but as a theft. Asterisk, her relationship with Aiden had been stolen, piece by piece, word by word, until he no longer recognized the woman who had raised him. Asterisk, she poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were still thick, but in the distance, a sliver of sunlight pushed through. It lit up the tips of the trees like a warning flare. Asterisk, Edith didn't know what her next move would be. Asterisk, but she knew she wouldn't fade quietly. Asterisk, this wasn't over. Not yet. Asterisk, the following days passed in slow, deliberate silence. Every movement Edith made was laced with the weight of a realization she had long refused to accept, that her own daughter had turned her only grandson against her. The evidence no longer rested on instinct alone. Marla's words still echoed in her ears. each syllable carving deeper into the wound that her birthday had opened. It wasn't just about being blocked anymore. It was about being erased, story by story, memory by memory, until the role she had played in Aiden's life no longer existed in his eyes. She found herself moving through her home like a ghost. The walls, once lined with the joyful remnants of Aiden's childhood, now stared back at her like accusations. The drawings he had made were still pinned to the corkboard in the hallway, crayon-drawn suns and crooked houses with stick figures holding hands under smiling skies. She had preserved every small piece of his youth like treasures. Now they felt like relics from a life that had been edited out of his version of reality. She stood in front of one drawing longer than the others. It showed a small boy and an older woman holding hands. Above it, in wobbly handwriting, it read, "Me and Nana going to the zoo." Her heart ached as she reached out and gently traced the word Nana, a simple, four-letter word that had once meant the world to him, and now it was just a whisper from the past. But Edith was not a woman to collapse quietly beneath the weight of betrayal. The pain inside her was transforming into something stronger. Not revenge in the cruel sense, but a determination to reclaim her truth, to ensure that her story would not be rewritten by others. If they wanted to forget her, she would remind them of who she was, not with anger, not with shouting, but with precision, grace, and unshakable resolve. The first thing she did was dig out an old leather satchel she hadn't used in years. She packed it with documents, birth certificates, school registration papers, legal guardianship forms, even handwritten notes from teachers. She had been Aiden's sole caretaker for almost 6 years. She had signed every field trip, permission slip, attended every school event, paid for every meal when Lily was too lost in her chaos to notice her son's needs. These papers weren't just records, they were proof of her presence, her labor, her love. Next, she pulled out the dusty laptop she rarely used anymore and opened a blank document. She began typing. It was slow at first. Her fingers trembled slightly, the sting of each word pressing deeper into her memory, but the more she wrote, the steadier she became. She started from the beginning, from the day Aiden was born, and Lily placed him in her arms, exhausted and overwhelmed. She wrote about late-night feedings, potty training, bedtime stories, and birthday parties. She documented everything. She called it the forgotten years, not for herself, but for Aiden. She wasn't writing to guilt him, she was writing to leave a record. One day, whether in 10 years or in a distant, painful moment of realization, he would need to know the truth. And when that day came, her story would be ready. Each day after that, she committed herself to the project. Morning tea, followed by a few hours of writing, lunch, a walk around the neighborhood, and then more writing in the evening. It gave her a sense of purpose, a reason to wake up, a way to turn her grief into legacy. On the 5th day, while cleaning her bookshelf, she came across a small, green notebook Aiden had once used for journaling. He was only 10 at the time and had insisted on keeping it private, but he had left it with her once by accident, and she had peeked only once before feeling guilty and setting it aside. Now, with shaking hands, she opened it again. The entries were short and innocent. Today, Nana made grilled cheese. I love her grilled cheese. Mom yelled on the phone again. I hid in Nana's bed. Nana read me a book about space. I want to go to the moon with her. Each line hit her like a tidal wave. This boy had loved her deeply. She wasn't imagining the bond. It was written in his own words. His heart had once been open to her completely. What force could be strong enough to sever that? She felt her sorrow rise again, this time sharper than before. But instead of sinking into it, she returned to her writing. She copied those entries into her document, weaving them into her narrative like threads of truth. Every sentence he had written as a child became a defense against the erasure Lily had tried to impose. Later that evening, she received a message from her neighbor, Clara. Clara was younger, in her 40s, with 2 boys of her own. She often checked in on Edith and brought her vegetables from her garden. The message was simple. Thinking of you this week. If you need anything, let me know. Edith hesitated before replying. Then, she wrote back, would you mind having tea tomorrow? I need to talk. The next afternoon, Clara came over with lemon cookies and a warm smile. They sat together in the living room, the tea steaming between them. Asterisk, I heard from someone in town that Lily's been saying some things, Clara said gently, once Edith brought her up. I didn't know if I should mention it. Asterisk, you can, Edith replied. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. Asterisk, Clara looked at her carefully. She said you're emotionally manipulative. That you tried to make Aiden feel guilty every time he didn't call. That you used your loneliness to trap him in obligation. Edith flinched. It was one thing to suspect slander, another to hear the words out loud. Asterisk, I don't know what she told him. Clara continued, but I saw how you raised that boy. I saw how he used to run into your arms. You were never controlling. You were his home. Asterisk, Edith's eyes shimmered. That's what I thought too. But it's amazing how stories can be twisted. Asterisk, Clara nodded. People lie to justify what they don't want to feel guilty for. Those words stayed with Edith long after Clara left. She stood at the kitchen sink that night, washing the dishes by hand like she always did, but her mind was elsewhere. Her grief was slowly transforming, again not into rage, but into clarity. She didn't need to fight Lily. She didn't need to scream for Aiden's attention. Asterisk, she just needed to live her truth loudly enough that it echoed through time. Asterisk, later that week, she began printing the pages of her memoir one chapter at a time. She compiled the documents, photos, Aiden's old notebook entries, and even the school letters. She placed them all in a thick leather binder. She didn't know when or how she would give it to him, but it was there now. A record, a defense against silence, a story only she could tell. She also made a decision. She would stop waiting for the doorbell to ring, for the phone to buzz, for the silence to break on its own. If life had taught her anything, it was that peace doesn't come by accident. It is something you fight for, earn, and protect. Asterisk, she began volunteering at the local community library twice a week, helping children pick out books, reading aloud during story time. It was a different kind of joy, one that came without expectation. The children didn't know her past. They didn't care about the absence of calls or the betrayal of blood. They only saw a kind face and a warm voice. Asterisk, at first, she worried it would feel like a poor replacement for Aiden, but soon, she realized something powerful. Asterisk, she could still give love. Asterisk, even if it wasn't received the way she once hoped. Asterisk, one day, as she packed up the library supplies, a small girl tugged on her sleeve and said, "You remind me of my grandma." Asterisk, Edith smiled, her heart swelling in a way it hadn't in weeks. "That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me all month." Asterisk, as she walked home that evening, her steps lighter than they had been in a long time. She thought of Aiden. Asterisk, not with the same sharp pain, but with something quieter, a sadness still, yes, but also a strange kind of hope. Not that he would return, not yet, but that one day, maybe years from now, something would stir in his memory, a smell, a story, a slice of pecan pie, and he would remember her not through Lily's words, but through his own. Asterisk, and when that day came, her story would be waiting, quietly, patiently, just like she always had. The days began to fold into each other, quiet and routine, yet underneath that calm surface, something fierce had started to stir inside Edith. She had spent too many years waiting, too many days hoping, and too many nights aching in silence. But now, she was no longer the grandmother who waited by the phone or stared at the mailbox, longing for a letter that never came. She had become something else, someone with purpose, with clarity, with a story too powerful to be erased. Asterisk, by the start of the next week, her memoir was taking shape. The binder grew thicker with every printed page, each chapter a piece of her heart carved onto paper. She hadn't shown it to anyone yet. This wasn't for sympathy or validation. This was for Aiden, for the boy who used to call her Nana, with pride, not shame, the boy who had once promised never to forget her, even if the rest of the world did. Asterisk, but something in her had shifted once again. Writing had healed parts of her, yes, but the wounds still throbbed beneath the surface. There was a coldness to being cast aside without reason. The act of being blocked wasn't just a modern inconvenience, it was a symbol, a digital disowning, a message that she no longer existed in his world. Asterisk, and Edith, despite all her years of wisdom, wasn't quite ready to accept that. Asterisk, that Wednesday, she visited the town hall. The clerk at the front desk, a young woman in her 20s, greeted her with the usual small-town warmth. Edith, dressed neatly in a blue blouse and a cardigan, leaned over the counter. Asterisk, I'd like to schedule a request to access guardianship archives. she said with calm precision. Asterisk, the woman blinked. Of course. Do you have the dates and documentation? Edith nodded and handed over a folder with copies of her legal guardianship papers. She knew the request might seem strange, but she wanted a certified copy, something official, something she could hold up like a shield if ever questioned again. Asterisk, the process would take 2 days. She thanked the clerk and walked out feeling strangely lighter. Every action she took now felt like a quiet declaration. You may have forgotten me, she thought, but I will not allow myself to be forgotten without a fight. Asterisk, later that afternoon, she took out the old tin box where she kept her letters. Most were from her late husband, written during his deployment years ago, but among them was another set letters Aiden had written to her from summer camps, from school, from his first solo trip to visit his father when he was 12. Asterisk, each letter was a golden thread, tethering her to a past that was being rewritten in her absence. I miss you, Nana, one letter said in his scratchy, youthful handwriting. I wish you were here instead of Mom's house. It's boring without you. Asterisk, she laughed softly, bitterly. That letter had once made her cry with joy. Now it made her ache with confusion. How could someone who wrote those words now act as if she were invisible? Asterisk, she didn't just keep those letters. She added them to the memoir scanned and printed in full color. She didn't alter them, didn't comment, didn't explain. The truth didn't need embellishment. It stood on its own, unshakable and clear. Asterisk, but the memoir wasn't enough. She needed something more. Aiden had severed the bridge between them with a few taps on his screen, believing it was over. Edith, however, had no intention of letting him walk away thinking her love had simply dissolved. Asterisk, she began working on a video with the help of her neighbor Clara's son, who was a film student. She created a short montage, a digital scrapbook of memories set to soft piano music. It began with her holding Aiden as a newborn, her smile bright and full of purpose. Then it moved through the years, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school plays, science fair projects, ice cream days, and quiet evenings on the porch swing. Asterisk, each clip, each photo was labeled by year and location. The captions weren't dramatic. They simply said what the photo showed. First day of 2nd grade, Nana packed his lunch, trip to the lake, he forgot sunscreen. Nana had extra sick. Nana stayed up all night reading to him. Asterisk, she didn't intend to publish the video or post it online. It was meant for one viewer. Aiden, when he was ready he would see it. She didn't want to beg for his attention. She wanted to remind him who she was before someone else rewrote her name out of his life. Asterisk, when the film student finished editing the video, Edith watched it alone. She cried with pain this time, but with a strange kind of resolve. It was the cry of someone reclaiming their story. She copied the video onto a USB drive and placed it in the back of her memoir binder. Asterisk, the next day, she returned to the town hall and collected the certified guardianship papers. As she walked out, the wind caught her scarf and tossed it over her shoulder like a cape. She adjusted it, smiled faintly, and kept walking. Asterisk, later that evening, she received a phone call. The number wasn't familiar, but something in her gut told her to answer. Asterisk, hello, she said cautiously. Asterisk, Edith, it's Jordan, Aiden's old music teacher. Asterisk, she straightened. Oh, Jordan, yes, of course. Asterisk, I don't mean to intrude, he said gently, but I saw Lily at the grocery store the other day, and she made a comment that bothered me. She said something about how you were emotionally manipulative and how Aiden had to cut you off to heal. I was shocked. Edith's hand trembled slightly. I told her she was wrong, Jordan continued. I told her I saw how much you loved that boy, how you came to every recital, how you encouraged him even when he struggled with confidence. Asterisk, thank you, Edith whispered. I don't know what she's told him. Asterisk, I don't either, he said. But if you ever need a character reference, I'll write one gladly. You deserve better than what's happening. After she hung up, she sat in silence for a long time. The damage was more severe than she realized. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate campaign of erasure. Her image had been distorted, her motives questioned, her love reinterpreted as control, and the boy she had raised had bought into the lie. Asterisk, but Edith wasn't defeated. Not anymore. Asterisk, she began working on a second binder, this one organized not by year, but by event. She titled it, For When You're Ready. Inside it, she placed, asterisk, the certified guardianship papers, a timeline of his upbringing, letters from teachers and neighbors, photos with dates and captions, the USB drive with the video asterisk, and finally, a single-page letter addressed to Aiden asterisk. The letter wasn't long. It simply said, "Greater than my dear Aiden, I don't know what you've been told, and I won't try to undo it with words, asterisk, but I do know the love I gave you, and I know what we meant to each other. Asterisk, if one day you begin to question the story you've been given, this binder will be here, not to make you feel guilty, asterisk, but to remind you that once there was a love pure and true between a boy and his nana, asterisk, and that love never left you, even if you left it, with all my heart, Nana asterisk." She sealed the binder in a box, labeled it clearly, and stored it in her closet. It was no longer about what she could fix today. It was about what she could leave behind. Asterisk, that night, she lit a candle, not for mourning, but for memory. She sat in her chair, tea in hand, and stared out the window at the stars above. Asterisk, she didn't know when Aiden would remember. Maybe it would take years. Maybe it would come at a moment when his own child asked him about his childhood. Maybe he'd stumble upon an old photo and feel something stir in his chest. Asterisk, whenever it happened, if it happened, she would be ready. Asterisk, and if it never did, then at least she knew she had told her truth, not through confrontation, but through legacy. Love, she had learned, wasn't always a bond you could hold on to. Sometimes, it was a story you had to leave behind, like a map, hoping that one day, the person you loved would find their way back. Asterisk, winter arrived earlier than usual that year, casting a quiet hush across the town. The trees shed their final leaves, revealing bare, vulnerable branches, and the first frost clung to Edith's window panes like delicate lace. The silence outside mirrored the quiet storm within her. Each morning she awoke, wrapped in her wool blanket, and stared at the ceiling for long minutes before rising, as if bracing herself to face the empty stillness of another day. Asterisk, but despite the cold in the air and the lingering ache in her chest, she felt strangely strong, the kind of strength that is born not from ease, but from endurance. In the past few weeks, she had begun to move differently. There was intention in her steps, conviction in her hands. She was not healed, not by any stretch, but she was no longer lost. Asterisk, her home, once a museum of paused memories, had become a quiet workshop for her legacy. The memoir, now completed, was neatly stored away. The evidence binder rested beside it, sealed, labeled, and waiting. It no longer lived on her desk, but in a drawer, a sign that she was not letting it consume her life, only keeping it close in case the moment came. Asterisk, Edith now filled her days with volunteering, cooking, walking, and sometimes sitting with Clara in the garden despite the chill, both of them bundled in coats and scarves, sipping hot cider. They didn't speak often of what had happened. Clara had a respectful way of being present without pressing too hard, but Edith knew that her presence had helped like a steady light flickering in a room otherwise dark. Asterisk, still, every now and then, when the wind howled or the old rocking chair creaked without anyone sitting in it, Edith's mind would drift back to Aiden, not out of desperation anymore, but out of habit. She wondered what he looked like now, if his voice had changed, if he still listened to the same songs they used to sing in the car, if, in the quiet moments of his own life, he ever thought of her. Asterisk, one afternoon, as snow gently fell outside, she decided to go through the attic again, not for more memories, but for closure. There were boxers she had avoided for too long, especially the ones filled with Lily's childhood belongings. She hadn't looked at them in years. There had always been a quiet tension between them, even in the best times. Lily had always seemed to resist closeness, as if love itself carried hidden hooks. Asterisk, as Edith opened the boxes, a flood of scents and images hit her: old perfumes, faded photographs, a pair of ballet shoes, a music box that still played the same broken tune. She sat down on the floor, the cold wood pressing through her clothes, and sifted through the artifacts of a daughter she no longer understood. Asterisk, she found a Aerosmall, pink, with a little heart-shaped lock that had long since broken off. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, not sure if she was ready for what lay inside, but page after page revealed a younger Lily, a girl, confused, angry, desperate for love but afraid to admit it. Asterisk, I don't think Mom loves me like she loves Aiden. One entry read. Asterisk, she's always smiling at him. She never smiled like that at me. Asterisk, another, I want to be close to her, but every time I try, I feel like I'm drowning. Edith closed the book slowly, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't the words themselves that stung, it was what they revealed, that the wound between them was old, deep, and likely had festered for decades without healing. And Lily, in her pain, had turned her own son into a weapon not to destroy Edith, but to defend herself against the ghost of a hurt child she had never confronted. Suddenly, everything felt sharper and sadder. She sat on the attic floor for a long time, the diary open beside her, snow falling softly on the roof above. She wasn't sure if this new understanding made things better or worse, but it brought clarity. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about inheritance, the kind no one talks about. The emotional DNA passed down silently, generation to generation, pain disguised as protection, distance pretending to be strength. That night, Edith didn't sleep. She stayed by the fire, her thoughts too loud for rest. She thought about how cycles repeat, how unloved daughters become overcompensating mothers, and then become unloved again by the very people they swore to protect differently. And then, somewhere between the crackling logs and the ticking of the wall clock, she made a decision. She would not let the story end with silence. Not with Aiden, not with Lily, not with herself. The next morning, she wrote a letter, not to Aiden but to her daughter. Greater than, Lily, I found your diary. I wasn't looking for it, but maybe it was meant to find me. I read your pain, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. I didn't know you felt that way. Or maybe I did, but I was too afraid to face it. I know I made mistakes. I know I smiled more at Aiden because I didn't know how to smile at you. But I loved you. I love you still. I don't want our story to end in silence. You may not believe me. You may never forgive me. But this is me trying. I hope, someday, we can talk again. Not as mother and daughter, but as two women who both tried and failed and still have time to try again. Mom. She didn't expect a reply. She didn't even expect the letter to change anything. But it was necessary. It was her way of unfreezing the words that had long been buried under years of resentment and regret. She mailed it the same day, and then she let go, not of the love that remained, but of the expectation. Days passed. Christmas neared. The neighborhood lit up with wreaths, lights, laughter. Edith hung a single wreath on her front door. She didn't decorate the inside, not because she wasn't in the mood, but because she was learning the art of simplicity. Joy didn't have to be loud. It could be soft, quiet, present even in the smallest of gestures. On Christmas Eve, she received a package, no return address. Inside was a book, a novel she had once mentioned loving when Aiden was 12. Tucked inside was a small note. I saw this and thought of you. Merry Christmas. No signature. She stared at the handwriting. She would have recognized it anywhere. It was his. Her hands shook slightly as she held the note. No apology number. Explanation. Just a quiet offering, wrapped in uncertainty. But for Edith, it was enough. Not because it fixed anything, but because it meant he remembered. Somewhere in that tall, silent teenager she no longer knew, the child she had raised still existed, still had eyes for her, still reached for her, even if in small, safe ways. She placed the book on her shelf, right next to the binder marked, "For when you're ready." And then, for the first time in months, she smiled without effort. She didn't text him. She didn't write back. She wanted him to lead the next step. Love, she'd learned, wasn't about chasing. It was about showing up and waiting with dignity. That night, she lit 2 candles. One for the past, one for whatever might come next. As the snow fell outside and the fire crackled within, Edith sat in her chair, her tea warm in her hands, and allowed herself finally to rest. She had survived the silence. She had told her truth. And now, a new chapter was waiting, not of revenge, not even of justice, but of quiet redemption, the kind that begins not with a dramatic reunion, but with a single book and a handwritten note that says, "I haven't forgotten." The new year crept in with little fanfare. Edith didn't stay up to count the minutes, nor did she toast with champagne or make lofty resolutions. Instead, she welcomed it with a quiet breath, watching the midnight snow drift lazily from her window. She sat wrapped in a knitted shawl, a gift from a neighbor years ago, cradling a mug of cinnamon tea as the clock ticked past 12. This year, She felt no urge to mark time by what was lost. Instead, she decided to honor it by what remained. The memory of the anonymous gift, the book, and the unsigned notes still lingered warmly in her chest. She hadn't spoken of it to anyone, not even Clara. Some feelings, she believed, needed to stay quietly held, like fragile things in cupped hands. It wasn't a grand gesture, nor a clear olive branch, but it was something, and in that something was enough to breathe again. But Edith was no fool. She knew life rarely unfolded in neat resolutions. She didn't delude herself into believing one thoughtful package could undo months of silence or years of misunderstandings. Yet, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she had a direction that didn't lead into a void. That single gesture told her that her story, her existence, still lived somewhere in Aiden's mind, perhaps tucked away behind layers of influence, confusion, and pain. She began each morning with renewed calm. Her house felt less like a shrine to the past and more like a place where new things could still happen. She returned to her volunteer work with more heart, reading to children at the library and organizing a weekly memory circle for older residents, where they'd gather, sip coffee, and share stories from their youth. She was surprised by how healing it was watching others laugh at memories that had once been wrapped in grief. It reminded her that even sorrow fades into something lighter, if you let it. During one of those memory circle sessions, a woman named Laverne, recounted how her daughter once refused to speak to her for nearly 5 years over a misunderstanding. She thought I'd thrown away her college acceptance letter on purpose, Laverne said, rolling her eyes. Can you believe that? I'd put it in the freezer by accident. Thought it was a coupon, but she held that grudge like a sword. The group erupted in laughter, and Edith smiled. Did she ever forgive you? She asked quietly. Laverne nodded. Took a while, but people come around. Not always the way you expect, but they do. The important thing is to stay steady in your love. Be the place they can return to, not the storm that scared them away. Edith carried those words home like a secret talisman. It was strange how comfort sometimes came from strangers saying things you didn't know you needed to hear. A few days later, while organizing her kitchen drawers, she came across something unexpected, a small, folded paper towel tucked behind the spice rack. It was a note Aiden had written when he was 8, likely forgotten there in haste. Greater than, Dear Nana, I love your pancakes more than anything. When I grow up, I'll make them for you every Sunday, like you do for me. I promise. She stood still for a long time, the note held delicately in her fingers. The child who wrote that note had loved her without conditions. He had known nothing of adult bitterness or warped narratives. His love had been pure, unshaped by the expectations and conflicts that would come later. A question rose in her heart. What would she do if he knocked on her door tomorrow? Would she run to him? Would she hesitate? Would she demand an explanation, or simply hold him and let the past melt away? She didn't know the answer yet, but she knew one thing with certainty. She would not punish him for being young, for being misled, or for needing space. Her love for him, despite everything, had always been built on the understanding that growing up often comes with confusion. A week later, while sipping tea in her garden despite the chilly air, Clara stopped by with news. I was at the community center this morning, Clara said, and guess who I ran into? Edith raised an eyebrow. Lily. Edith froze. Lily, she's here. Clara nodded. I think she's visiting someone nearby, but she saw me, and we talked, briefly. Edith's heart fluttered not with joy, but with a kind of tight, restrained anxiety. What did she say? Clara hesitated. She didn't bring up you. Not directly, but I could see something off her eyes. They were tired, not physically emotional, like someone carrying too much for too long. Edith sighed. That description didn't surprise her. Lily had always worn her emotions like armor, rigid, protective, impenetrable, and yet, that same armor had also kept love at a distance, even from her own mother. She asked me how you were, Clara added, softer now. She didn't wait for the answer, but she asked. That small detail stayed with Edith long after Clara left. It wasn't a reconciliation, not even a conversation, but it was a sliver of interest. However hesitant, people don't ask about those they've forgotten. That night, she did something she hadn't done in years. She opened an old box of cassette tapes. Her husband, Thomas, had recorded home videos and voice messages when Aiden was little. One of them was labeled Pancake Sundays, age 7. Asterisk. She popped the tape into the dusty player and pressed play. Crackling audio filled the room, followed by her husband's voice narrating as Edith's flipped pancakes and Aiden squealed in the background. Asterisk. Nana's pancakes are the best in the world, his tiny voice cried. Asterisk. What do you say, chef? Thomas asked. Asterisk. Greater than I say I'm gonna marry Nana so she can make pancakes forever. Asterisk. She laughed softly, the sound cracking from both joy and pain. Time had taken so much, but it could never take that memory. Asterisk. And then, an idea bloomed. She pulled out a blank card and began writing. Greater than dear Aiden. Asterisk. You once told me you'd make pancakes for me every Sunday when you grew up. I'm still waiting. No pressure. No expectations. Just a kitchen that smells a little less like joy without you. Asterisk. Love, always. Nana. She didn't sign it with her full name. Just Nana. Asterisk. She placed the card in an envelope, along with a copy of his childhood pancake recipe they'd written together. She addressed it with shaking hands and left it unsealed for a moment, her thumb resting on the edge. Asterisk. She didn't know if she'd send it, but it felt good to write it. 2 days later, she sent it. Not as a summons, not as a plea, but as a reminder that her door, her kitchen, and her love were still there unchanged, undemanding, simply waiting. Asterisk. Winter wore on, and the days continued with their quiet rhythm. Each morning she watched the sun rise a little earlier, a quiet promise that spring was coming. She didn't know if Aiden would ever write back, or if Lily would ever confront the silence between them, but she no longer felt powerless. She had given love, she had told her story, she had refused to disappear. Asterisk. And in doing so, she had reclaimed herself not just as a grandmother or a mother, but as a woman who had survived heartbreak without becoming bitter. Asterisk. A woman who had learned that letting go wasn't the same as giving up. It was strength disguised as surrender. The kind of strength passed down, not through genetics, but through memory, kindness, and letters written in hope. And sometimes, that's all it takes. The final weeks of winter settled upon Edith's small town like a heavy quilt. The air was crisp, the skies frequently a soft shade of gray, and the wind moved with a certain patience, as if even nature had paused to reflect. The sidewalks were coated in a brittle sheen of frost, and each morning Edith would peer out her front window to see the trees stiff with cold, their branches etched against the dull sky like veins reaching upward. Asterisk. Inside, her house was warm, not just from the heat that hummed through the radiators, but from the quiet defiance that now pulsed gently through every room. Her world hadn't changed dramatically on the surface. Aiden hadn't called, Lily hadn't written back, Edith had. She no longer waited with her hands folded in hope or her heart stretched in anticipation. Now, she lived each day not as a prelude to reconciliation but as a reward for surviving it all. Asterisk. Each room in her house reflected that shift. Asterisk. The once untouched living room was now frequently filled with musical jazz and blues records that Thomas used to love. She'd play them while she worked on crossword puzzles or wrote short reflections in the new journal Clara had gifted her for the new year. The kitchen, once haunted by absent conversations, had regained its rhythm, filled again with the aroma of fresh baking. She returned to her Sunday pancake routine. Even if she made only one stack, she made them for herself now. Asterisk. Sometimes, she'd make a double portion and place the second plate on the other side of the table. Not as an act of delusion but as a quiet ritual, a symbolic reminder. Love continues, even if the chair is empty. Asterisk. That week, she received an envelope without a sender's name. Her heart thumped with a cautious kind of hope. She sat at her table, turned the letter in her hands several times, and finally opened it. Asterisk. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, no handwriting, no greeting, no closing, just a short message. Greater than I've been thinking about the pancakes too. Sorry, I don't know what to say yet, but I think I want to understand what happened. That was all. Asterisk. There was no signature, but she didn't need one. She knew. She recognized his hesitation, his rhythm, the way he softened apology into suggestion. She held the letter against her chest, not crying this time, but breathing deep and long, as if she had been underwater for months and had finally found air. Asterisk. She didn't reply immediately. She didn't rush to the phone or begin drafting a response. Instead, she sat still, letting the message settle into her. This was not the grand reunion people spoke of in novels or movies. This was something slower, truer, a beginning stitched together by broken threads. Asterisk the following morning, she took a walk to the park, the same park where Aiden once ran through piles of leaves and fed the ducks with crusts of bread. The pond was frozen over now, the ducks gone south for the winter, and only a few people wandered the footpath. She found their old bench, brushed off the thin layer of snow, and sat down. Asterisk she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a photograph, an old one from a fall picnic many years ago. Aiden had insisted on bringing a cardboard crown he had made in school and wore it all day, calling himself the Pancake Prince. She kept that photo not in her albums but folded tightly in her wallet, close to her heart. Asterisk she stared at it for a long time before sliding it back into her pocket. She wasn't sure what would come next, but she was beginning to understand something crucial. Not every love story ends with closure. Some end with continued love, and some, like hers, never end at all. Asterisk later that day, she sat down to write not as a direct reply, but as a reflection, something she would hold until the time was right. Greater than, dear Aiden, there are things I wish I could say in a way that doesn't sound like a defense or a plea. But all I can give you is what I know to be true. Asterisk you were never a burden to me. Not for a second. You were joy. You were light. You were my second chance at everything I didn't know how to do the first time. Asterisk if I held on too tightly, it was only because the world had already taught me how easily love can be lost. That's not your fault. That's mine to carry. Asterisk I don't need you to explain yourself. I don't need you to justify the silence. Asterisk I just want you to know, the kitchen is still warm, the stories are still waiting, and I am still here. Asterisk Nana. Asterisk she folded the letter and placed it in an envelope, sealing it carefully. She didn't send it that day. She kept it beside the memoir binder, tucked gently between chapters, as if waiting for the story to decide where it would go next. Asterisk another week passed. Then one evening, Clara stopped by again, her cheeks red from the cold, carrying a parcel in a brown paper bag. Asterisk something for you, she said, placing it on Edith's dining table. Asterisk inside was a small box. Edith opened it slowly to find a black and white photo, framed, of a young Aiden sitting on her lap during his 6th birthday. It was the same photo she'd kept for years, but this one was reprinted, restored. The image was clear, the colors enhanced, the background slightly faded for dramatic effect. Asterisk beneath it was a sticky note. Asterisk greater than thought you might want a clearer copy of this. I found it on Mom's old laptop. Her breath caught. He was looking. He was searching through the past. Not erasing it anymore, but retrieving it, holding it, offering pieces of it back to her. Asterisk that night, she sat by the fire and looked around her living room. The framed photo now rested on her mantel, beside the small ceramic owl Aiden had made in 3rd grade art class. She didn't think it would ever return to her, but there it wasn't, other relic restored. Asterisk it was in these small moments that Edith began to understand the quiet power of endurance. She hadn't fought with force. She hadn't begged or retaliated. She had simply stayed, present, rooted, a quiet witness to her own truth. Asterisk her revenge, if she ever desired any, had not come in the form of drama or defiance. It had arrived in the form of remembrance, her own, and eventually his, a slow unraveling of misunderstanding, a reluctant, fragile bridge built from shared memories. She thought again of Lily. There was still no letter from her, no call, no answer to the one Edith had sent weeks ago, and yet Aiden's gestures suggested something deeper. Perhaps Lily, even in her silence, had opened the door, just a crack. Perhaps she had said, in her own way, go find out for yourself. Asterisk and he had. Asterisk that night, Edith took out 2 cups from the cupboard. She made hot cocoa with whipped cream, the way Aiden used to like it, with a dash of cinnamon on top. Asterisk. She placed 1 cup across the table from hers and said nothing. Asterisk. No words, no dramatics, just quiet space, for a boy becoming a man. Asterisk for a grandmother, learning how to forgive without hearing the words. Asterisk and 4 times the most mysterious character in every story, to do what it always does, stretch, soften, and make room for return. Asterisk outside. The snow began to melt just slightly, the first sign that spring was somewhere on the horizon. Asterisk and inside, a woman who had once been forgotten began to feel remembered, not loudly, but in pieces. Asterisk and piece by piece. That was enough. Asterisk the first day of spring arrived with little ceremony. The snow had mostly melted, leaving behind the pale, muddy ground that now stretched beneath Edith's garden. Tiny green shoots were beginning to appear near the edges of her stone pathway, uncertain but brave. It reminded her of the way healing works, not all at once, but slowly, timidly, and sometimes without you noticing, until one day you look up and the trees are blooming again. She stood on her porch that morning, a light breeze brushing against her cheeks. She was holding a small packet of wildflower seeds, ones she had saved from last year, unsure at the time if she'd even have the strength to plant anything again. But here she was, fingers ready to press them into the soil, mind quiet and at peace. As she moved to the garden bed, spade in hand, she felt something different. Not a loss, not a longing, but presence. The pain that once clung to every corner of her home had been replaced by a sense of quiet acceptance. There were still echoes, still empty spaces where voices had once lived, but those spaces were no longer hollow. They were sacred, places where memory resided, not regret. The memoir had been finished for over a month now. The binder remained untouched in its drawer, and the second one, the one titled For When You're Ready, still sat beneath it, dusted weakly, protected like a precious heirloom. She didn't know if she would ever need to give it to Aiden. Perhaps he would come back without prompting. Or perhaps he would never return fully, but would find his way through scattered gestures, glimpses of the past, and his own unfolding maturity. But something inside Edith told her that she had done enough. She no longer felt the heavy urge to prove her worth, to plead for remembrance. She had spoken her truth, she had protected her love, and she had endured. The doorbell rang around noon. She wiped her hands on her apron and made her way to the front of the house, expecting it to be Clara, or perhaps a delivery. But when she opened the door, time seemed to catch in her throat. It was Aiden. He looked taller than she remembered, older of course, and quieter in his presence. He wore a navy hoodie, jeans slightly frayed at the knee, and held a backpack slung loosely over one shoulder. His hair was longer, curling slightly around his ears, and his eyes, those same brown eyes she'd once read bedtime stories to, held a kind of storm inside them. Not anger, not even confusion, but something deeper, like someone who had traveled a long way carrying questions he didn't yet know how to ask. Nana, he said, his voice a little hoarse. She stood frozen for a beat too long, her heart thudding in her chest. Then she stepped back, opening the door wider, and said, softly, "Come in, sweetheart, you must be cold." He walked in slowly, his eyes scanning the room like it was both foreign and familiar. The scent of cinnamon still lingered faintly in the air. The same framed photo he had mailed now sat on the mantel, along with a few new ones she'd printed from the past. He noticed them but said nothing. Instead, he looked down at his shoes for a moment, like a boy who hadn't quite figured out how to be a man. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. She smiled gently. "Then don't say anything yet. Let's sit." They sat in the living room, across from each other. A space that had once been filled with silence, now brimmed with something else, something alive, a possibility. "I got your note," she said quietly. "The one about the pancakes." Aiden nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "I remembered that day last Christmas, the way you used to sing that silly pancake song. I thought maybe I didn't forget everything." "You didn't," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "You just misplaced it. It happens." He blinked quickly, as if holding something back. "She told me things, Mom. I mean, not lies, at least. I don't think she meant them that way, but versions of you, of the past, of what happened between you two. And I believed her. I needed to, because I didn't know how to believe both of you at the same time." Edith nodded, the weight of his confession pressing gently against her chest. "She was hurt," she said, "in ways I didn't always understand, and I think she needed you to be hers, entirely. That's what pain does sometimes, it makes us possessive of love." Aiden looked at her, his eyes glassy. "Were you really manipulative? Did I feel bad because you made me feel bad?" She took a deep breath. "I'm sure I made mistakes," she said. "I'm human, and I loved you more than I knew how to express in words. But I never wanted you to feel obligated to love me, only free to remember that I loved you first. That's all." There was silence between them, a kind of stillness that wasn't empty, but full of unsaid understanding. Asterisk then he pulled something from his backpack, a small notebook leather-bound and frayed around the edges. It was the one she had given him when he was 13, back when he said he wanted to be a writer. Asterisk, I found this, he said. I read the stuff I wrote in it. Some were stories, some were just notes about you, things I wanted to remember. I guess I thought they'd be true forever, and they still can be, she said, her smile trembling now. He looked down at the notebook, then back at her. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered. You don't have to, she replied. We're not broken. We're just growing, and sometimes growth feels like grief. Asterisk, a tear slipped down his cheek then, quick and uninvited. She reached out, slowly, and placed her hand over his. He didn't pull away. Asterisk, can I see the pancakes again? He asked, with a watery laugh. Asterisk, she chuckled. You hungry? He nodded. She rose and walked to the kitchen, her steps slow but steady. As she poured the batter into the pan, the scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air once again. It was as if time had folded in on itself and brought them back to a simpler moment, without erasing all that stood in between. Asterisk, when she placed the plate in front of him, he stared at it like it was something sacred. Then he picked up his fork and took a bite. Asterisk, they taste the same, he said, chewing slowly. I never changed the recipe, she replied. They ate in silence for a while. Then he said, I want to come back, not just today. I want to know you again. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. You already do, she said. You just forgot for a little while. And forgetting isn't the same as leaving. You were always mine. Asterisk, he looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing not just the woman in front of him, but all the years she had carried him without complaint. Asterisk, I think I needed to believe something that helped me survive, he said. Asterisk, and now? Asterisk, now, I think I need to believe something that helps me heal, she nodded, her chest aching in the most beautiful way, as the sun began to lower in the sky, casting golden light across the kitchen table. Edith knew something had shifted. The pain was not gone, nor the years lost returned, but the weight of estrangement had lessened. The bridge was not fully rebuilt, but they were both on it now, walking toward the middle. Asterisk later, as he stood at the door preparing to leave, he turned and hugged her, not quickly, not awkwardly, but fully, the way he used to, the way a grandson hugs the woman who gave him everything without ever asking for anything in return. Asterisk, I'll come back next Sunday, he said, for pancakes. She smiled. I'll be here. Asterisk, as the door closed gently behind him, and she returned to her chair by the window. She let out a long breath. Outside, the garden was beginning to bloom, tiny buds on the branches, patches of green, pushing through the thawing soil. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a real one. Asterisk, and sometimes, the quiet return of a lost heart is more powerful than any apology. Sometimes, the soft echo of footsteps coming back home says everything that words never could. Asterisk, and in that moment, Edith knew she hadn't just been remembered. She had been found.